North East devolution. Sheena?
Thank you, Chair. This report is an update to Cabinet on the next phase of the North East devolution deal for the LA7. The Government announced the Minder 2 deal for the 7 local authorities on the 28th of December. Just to be clear, the 7 local authorities I'm referring to will refer to LA7. Durham, Gateshead, Newcastle, North Tyneside, Northumberland, South Tyneside and Sunderland. So that is the LA7. The headlines will see a shift of power from central government to a mayoral combined authority. And in total, it would include a £4.2 billion additional investment fund to the region over 30 years. Sorry, not just an investment fund, there's a whole range of parts within that total up to £4.2 billion. The document, as you will see, is quite lengthy and has a lot of detail in it and a lot of evidence, but I will just quickly go through the recommendations and I'll open up for questions. So Cabinet is asked to endorse the Minder 2 devolution deal. This is set out for you in Appendix 2 in Annex A. Cabinet are asked to agree that the government's review that has been undertaken already concludes that a new MCA, or a new local authority 7 MCA, on the footprint of the 7 local authorities will improve the exercise of the Council's statutory duties. Cabinet will agree to publish a scheme for delivery of the governance changes. So this is the detailed scheme which is attached at Annex B, Appendix 2. Cabinet is also asked to undertake a consultation exercise across all of the 7 local authorities who will be part of the MCA. Cabinet is asked that, if necessary, the Chief Executive and in consultation with the leader will be authorised to take any steps necessary to implement these proposals. Finally, Cabinet are asked to note that a further report will come back to Cabinet at the end of the consultation process, setting out the consultation findings before this report is then sent on to the Secretary of State. The recommendations of the report are set out in detail in section 6. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I think we all realise how important the consultation exercise is, but perhaps could you give us a flavour of that? Will that be matched with publicity? Obviously it's important that there's online consultation, but will people be able to put their points of view in other ways? So just to get a flavour of the consultation, please.
I mean, what we will be doing, there will be a lot of online opportunities for people, but we will be having in-person meetings in each of the local authorities, because for some people they prefer to actually go and express their views in person. What we've intended to do is ensure that all 7 local authorities are basically doing the same type of thing. Who's involved in the consultation will be more determined by each individual local authority. So, for example, will there be leaders, will Cabinet be involved? You know, those are local decisions to be determined, but it will be comprehensive. Ian's been involved in the LA7 comms team. I don't know whether you want to add anything.
No, I think you've covered most things through you, Chair. I think obviously there's a commitment across the region to work collaboratively across the whole patch. I think, as Chief Text alludes to there, there'll be a combination of in-person and virtual meetings held. I think, as I say, publicity has been really important, and we are to start that digitally from back into this week with a launch from Monday of next week. So I think it is all come together well, as I say, across region. It's been working.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Yeah, I presume there'll be a media campaign as well to make people aware of the...
Yes, the press release as well.
Jonathan?
Thanks, Martin. I'll start by giving a sort of brief background as to my own position, because I have to go back 25 years when I was appointed to work for an organisation called the North East Constitutional Convention, which was a sort of cross-party and non-party organisation that was set up to draw up a set of proposals for devolution to the North East. And in those days, the North East was the LA7 plus Teesside and Darlington. And we came up with a set of proposals which sadly weren't accepted by the government, and when the government went for a devolution referendum in 2004, then the whole thing just got heavily defeated in the referendum. And I think the lesson was you have to go with a specific set of powers. People have to see the advantages, or else they'll see it as a white elephant. In fact, the opponents of this called it a white elephant, and they had a big white elephant that they took around all in various places. Well, back at the negotiating or the devolution table, and the proposals that have been worked up this time, I have to say, are quite radically different to what was proposed back in the start of the 21st century. We wanted a strategic body back in 2000, but also a body that was able to run some functions as well. What we've got instead now is a strategic body, and I think we have to sort of think of that in terms of not of it being an organisation that does not run services. So I've heard your comments, Martin, about how this does not make up for austerity. Well, austerity was cuts in services. This is not about cuts in services. This is about providing a strategic body, which is something that we have lacked in the region for the past few decades. And as a result, we've fallen behind places like London, Scotland, Wales, and now places like Greater Manchester. On the whole, I support devolution. This is not necessarily the model I would have liked, but I think to not have it now would be a mistake. But my first question is actually, we had a set of proposals in 2016. How does the current set of proposals differ from what we had 7 years ago?
Well, I'll answer that one, sorry. The first thing to say is that, notwithstanding some comments I've made about it not being levelling up and it's not a good deal, the fact is that I'm hugely supportive of taking this step forward. It comes from two things. First and foremost, it's a recognition of the fact that 7 local authorities across the north east of England who share common interests, who share the common passion for what's best for the region, can do a much better job of establishing a strategic authority for the north east of England. I think is a hugely positive step. I always thought that was the case. I thought that was the case in 2016. And what we said in 2016 is that we supported the principle of a strategic body across the region. We just didn't want an elected mayor. The issues related to the issue of an elected mayor. There's two things I would say about that demonstrate to me the strength and importance of a strategic authority across the region. Since 2016, we've had the North East Joint Transport Committee, covering Tyne and Wear, Northumberland and County Durham. And that's been really positive in terms of advancing our transport agenda. Now, yes, we have to persuade government to give us money for many, there's a North East Transport Plan with a £30 million of ambitions that we need over 30 years that we need to persuade the government, including the opening of the Leamside line. But for the first time, the regions collectively, along with the business community and the wider region, not just political parties or individual local authorities, coming together with one collective voice. That's been really positive. And the value of that, I think, has been demonstrated. Second point I've made is the way in which the local authorities work together, the earlier 7, during the pandemic. And the fact that we worked together, we didn't have a statutory body, we had no legal basis to do it, but we came together as 7 local authorities. We went on a weekly basis, the leaders and players of the local authorities, and planned and coordinated our health network across the whole of the region. And I can evidence and demonstrate how effective that was. And I would say that it saved lives. And to emphasise it. So there's that. Difference between now and 2016 is the particularly the issues around transport funding. Okay, the City Region Sustainable Transport Funding, which I think was announced in the 2019 budget, which allocated £4.2 billion. Half of which went to mayoral combined authorities, and the other half had to be bid for by the rest of the country. There's an allocation within that for the North East of England if we have a mayoral combined authority. Although we have a statutory body already, the North East Joint Transport Committee, and we've made representations to the government. I'm saying, you know, we have a statutory body that was established under statute. It was established by, well, this government, but the previous government, Conservative government, in 2016, and that fund, which is available, should be released to the region. We have a statutory body. It's a robust governance model. That's what they said. We need a robust governance model. Repeatedly requested release of those funds, and they've repeatedly refused, unless we have a mayoral combined authority. Now, you know, if we want release of those funds, we have to have a mayoral combined authority. I've always recognised and see the value in local authorities work together in partnership. Okay, I think it doesn't require the imposition of an elected mayor. However, the government is insisting on that model, and given the need for those resources, then we have to accept the fact that the resources only come with an elected mayor.
Well, just to respond, I'm still struggling to see what the difference is between 2016 and 2023. Because if we'd gone ahead with the devolution proposals back in 2016, we would have taken on the transport powers anyway. The only reason why we ended up with the Transport Committee was because the region split. But transport can only be dealt with strategically across the wider area of the North East. So the first set of proposals that were rejected back in 2016 would have had the transport powers anyway. Well, I'll look through the proposals that we've got now and that we've got from 2016, and it looks the same to me. You know, things like it has to be an elected mayor. That was what was on offer back in 2016 anyway. And in fact, we actually had, back in 2016, a mayoral system which was kind of like a first amongst equals, in that the mayor would be one vote on a cabinet of, what would it be, 8, because of 7 local authority leaders. And that is being proposed again, and I think by the only part of the country where that system is being offered. So there's no change there. I look at the other powers, there's no change there. You know, taking on housing, direction of housing policy and so on. There's a whole sort of gambit of powers which were available in 2016, which are still on offer now, and the overall package, I'm struggling to see where there's any significant differences between the two. And we had the argument 7 years ago, and I made it clear at the time that I was very disappointed that Gateshead, you know, because at one point it was Gateshead was the only one standing out against this, and I think we lost the leader and gained a new one, so on, as a result of that. But yeah, my feeling is that you described it yourself as current offer as you're not going to be twiddling your thumbs in a non-job. Well, we've spent 7 years now twiddling our thumbs whilst the devolution settlement awaits to be put into operation. And that's 7 lost years, whilst at the same time we've had Manchester, Greater Manchester powering ahead, and we've had other areas of the country that have been taking on devolution settlements as well. And the irony is, if you go back 25 years to the start of the Blair period in government, then the outside Scotland, London and Wales, the area that was most likely to get devolution was the North East. And we've gone from the front of the queue to the back of the queue. And we've had 7 years of twiddling our thumbs over a package which has not fundamentally changed in those 7 years. So we're 7 years behind where we should be.
Right, well, I'm really sorry, Jonathan, that you can't see the difference, but I did the first time explain the difference and I'll reiterate it again, okay? You say there's no difference to 2016, okay? Well, in terms of powers, there's 2 things, powers and funding, okay? In terms of powers, okay, you say we have a strategic transport body at the present time, right? But under the devolution deal, we will get additional powers, okay? I mean, for example, we will get the power to be able to, if we wanted to, and this decision hasn't been made yet, so it's necessarily something that's going to happen. Okay, I'm just saying it's something we get power. We get the power to regulate bus services again. Okay, that is a power which is only afforded to mayoral combined authorities. So if we were a mayoral combined authority, we gain the authority, the power to be able to regulate bus services. So it is different to the North East Joint Transport Committee, because at the present time we'd have to apply to the Secretary of State Commission to do that, and we don't know the outcome of that would be. But the most substantial issue is, as I've mentioned, City Region Sustainable Transport Fund. Okay? That's £650 million between 7 authorities over 5 years. Okay? Now, that money was allocated in 2019, but it was allocated, our allocation was held back, despite the fact we have a Joint Transport Committee, a statutory body, a robust governance model, and we requested release of it, but they said, no, it has to be released to a mayoral combined authority. So if we want that £650 million, which was only made available from 2019, then we have to be a mayoral combined authority. That is the difference. I can't spell it out any clearer than that in simpler language. The second thing you raised about was about Manchester. Manchester was always ahead. Manchester started this process long before 2016. However, at the present time, the government is in the base of a set of negotiations with Manchester, and I think it's West Midlands, around what's called Trailblazer, which is the next phase of devolution. Additional powers, particularly on training and skills and education, that are not, at the present time, not afforded to mayoral combined authorities. Now, there's been long and protracted negotiations over this devolution deal, and one of the last sticking points was about the, well, it was partly linked with the issue of County Durham, inclusion of County Durham. With the inclusion of County Durham, it takes the size of the North East Combined Authority to a similar size to Manchester and West Midlands, 2 million people. And in discussions with Michael Gove, we made it insistent that if we were to come together as a 7, that we should be included in that Trailblazer negotiations. So that those discussions, I think, have been going on for some time, and we are now included in that by becoming part of this mayoral combined authority with a population of 2 million. We will advance to that Trailblazer status, and so that the point that you make about we're 7 years behind, I simply don't recognise. Okay, we made a decision in 2016 based on the powers and funding that were available in 2016, and decided at that time, because we did not agree with the principle of elected mayor, that we continued the way that we were. We continued those discussions. I do recognise and see the value, and I'm positive about the capacity and potential of 7 local authorities working together with the right funding package. Okay? And we are being afforded the opportunity to negotiate for trail within the Trailblazer negotiations as well. So we are not losing out. We're not 7 years behind. We're at the front. Okay. Ron.
Martin, I think there's a central contradiction in what you're saying about transport, because you said that the extra 650 million would have been available had we had a regional mayoral system from 2019. So at the very least we're 4 years behind. I remember those arguments in 2016, and they were marginal arguments. We were all looking at a balance of advantage and disadvantage, but at that time we argued that you take the powers on offers then because they were going to increase, as indeed they have. I'm just going to say, from our point of view, you got that judgment wrong in 2016. We opposed that judgment. We supported the deal that was on offer in 2016. We are pleased that you've come to the table now. I think politically, both our parties, and I recognise the work that Gordon Brown's done recently, both our parties want a better deal than this. And fundamentally, I think going forward, because we don't just want to make the argument about the past, I think going forward it's absolutely critical that the new authority does become about the North East as a whole, because one of our ideological, that we share, one of our ideological points about the mayoral system is that if you have a mayor, people will like or dislike that mayor dependent on their politics. If you have a whole authority, as a regional assembly would have been, it would have represented the whole of the North East. It would have been something that could establish an identity in the North East, a loyalty in the North East, that a single individual mayor would not be able to do. And I think it's very important going forward, if we do go ahead with this, that you and the other leaders make sure that this is a mayoral authority where the mayor is first among equals, and that it is about a regional identity. And having the two, I can't remember in 2016 whether the proposal was to have a person from business and a person from the voluntary sector as it is now. I can't recall that. But having those is actually useful, even though they're not elected and we would prefer an elected authority, is useful in terms of manifesting an identity for the region as a whole, because that's one of the key advantages. Having something for ourselves, representing ourselves at a regional level, was always one of the critical advantages that you and I are argued for, and all of us argued for. There may be some people here who were too young, I don't know, looking round. Maybe not. In 2004, we all argued for in 2004, and unfortunately lost that argument. We lost that argument because the Department of Transport civil servants refused to move north. That's why we lost that argument. But Martin, I've got to say, you know, that extra money in 2019 would have become available had we made a different choice in 2016. You cannot get away from that.
Ron, I can stretch reality, but I can't break it. Okay, I concede 100%. Yeah, absolutely 100% right. That if we'd agreed in 2016, although we had no idea at all, I haven't got a crystal ball, I haven't got a time machine, so I don't know what was going to happen in 2019. But that money that was available from 2019 would have been available if we'd agreed to it in 2016. I completely and utterly, emphatically concede that point. However, it's through the process of the negotiations, that allocation, and I have been concerned that as it slips from one year to the next, will that money just slip back into the Treasury, be divided amongst the rest, or lost? And it hasn't. Our allocation is there for us to take up. So we have, I accept that we've had the pandemic in between, but it's been 2-3 years where we, and some of that money now has already been released as a consequence of us making the decision to agree the minded to deal. There's already been an allocation of revenue funding released by the Department of Transport, £5.6 million, which gives us the opportunity to employ the staff to start working on the capital projects, because we wouldn't have had a capital programme for City Region Transforming Cities funding runs out in March this year. We wouldn't have had a capital programme on transport going forward without agreeing these funds. Okay? So I accept entirely you're right that we would have had that money if we'd had a crystal ball in 2019, sorry, 16 to 19, but we haven't lost out as a consequence of it. And given that that funding is now available only on the basis of the Green to Mayoral Combined Authority, it's tipped the balance to, we always saw the positives of working in a strategic partnership, but there is sufficient funding there to make that worth making the decision on the Green to Mayoral. That's the difference. Is there anybody else? Okay. Can I ask, can we agree the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Okay. And that's on the agenda, so thank you very much, everybody.